Welcome back to Elmo Elaborates. I'm Ryan Bono. I'm here with my co-host, Cameron Pleasant. This is Season 2, Episode 16, a deep dive into Kernersville.
Kernersville!
So,
huge project.
Massive project. So the overall building is about 93,000 square foot.
Say what?
Yep. So I actually looked the other day. 93,000 square foot, and we were saying 96,000, but, you know, the plans have the actual square footage, so I took a look the other day. 93,000 square foot, and about 20 or 25,000 square foot was a existing tenant that stayed there throughout the duration of construction, and then we converted the other square footage, whatever it is, 75,000 square foot. We started this project before Cameron was on board with us, and then he was lucky enough to inherit this beast of a project as soon as we got it through permitting. So what were your thoughts when you first saw the building?
So I do remember like doing some initial work on it before I actually got eyes on it, because we had a lot of other projects that were going on. I got put in Lexington, Burlington, and Gastonia are kind of wrapping up. So no one was really, like, we're still in permitting, so no one's really on Kernersville yet. And we were doing a lot of upfront work, doing LVL counts, trying to get numbers on that. And I remember you just going back and forth with permitting, which seemed lovely.
Yes.
But once I actually got to the site and eyes on, it was like, holy, there's a diamond in here somewhere. Like, you talk about the diamond in the rough, but like there was no, like, I couldn't even see a glimpse of a shimmer. I was like, okay, what is this building? I remember I walked down to the basement. There's a roof leak coming down onto the first floor, down to the second floor, the basement, right? But like, I looked up, drop of water right in my eye. I was like, oh, I got tetanus for sure. I'm dying. Yeah. That went through so many nails and got me right in my eye. I remember that day. I was like, oh, this is it. I am going to be a vampire now.
Yeah.
So I just remember that being a huge, like, it was like, okay, what is this going to be? Especially, Lexington was my first one. So looking at it, like, I don't know how this is going to be Lexington at all.
So different.
So different.
But instead of getting tetanus, you caught the love bug. The love bug for Kernersville, and you dived right in.
Yeah, I would say that is what happened. So John wraps up on his two projects. You and John wrap up on there. Lexington's kind of coming to an end, and we're looking at transition, looking at some other projects, and we finally get an opportunity to really look at Kernersville. And I remember very clearly, John, you and I, we all went to Kernersville, and let's make a game plan for this thing, because we have a deadline, and we want to get started on it right away.
Yeah, I mean, that day was instrumental. But to talk about the condition of the building just a little bit more, before you were on the team, Levi, Drake, and Eric went and took a look at the building. And they took a look, and they came back, and then we went again a couple weeks later. And I just remember, like, the second time around, we were like, oh my goodness, this building is worse than we thought. Because they had cleared some stuff out at that point, because they were scaling down their operation. They were a hosiery, so they were distributing clothes, socks, a lot of different apparel items. And so they were starting to lighten their load because they were shutting down the business. And we remember, like, okay, now all the cardboard boxes are out of here. It actually looked a lot worse. So we revisited the budget and took a look, and we were like, man, we got to change some things. And we still felt like the market supported all that good stuff. And we just upped some numbers. The number one thing, like you mentioned, was the roof. I mean, the roof was in terrible condition, to the point where they actually took socks and stuffed them in the roof holes. There was like a flock of birds that were apparently loving that kind of EPDM roofing material, and they would just go up there and peck away the roof into a big enough hole where they were able to fit a bundle of socks in there.
It's a whole package of socks.
Yes, so that was eye-opening for us. I think we realized, like, okay, there's no part of this roof that we can save. It's all, even if we saved it, the birds are going to come eat it. So it's like, there's no point in saving this. So we got some numbers on the roof and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that building was extremely rough. And once we got back, we put some numbers to it, and we still felt confident that project was worth moving forward. And then we closed the building. Then it was time to start permitting. And as you were alluding to before, this was the hardest job to permit that I've run into so far on 6 or 7 jobs. Yeah. We met with them beforehand, and we were like, hey, like, what are your requirements and all that stuff? And they're like, we have something called a UDO. I'm like, okay, I know what that is. A Unified Development Ordinance. So they're always super long and super in depth and whatnot. And some jurisdictions like enforce it to the T, and then some jurisdictions just use it as a reference point. They enforce it to the T, right? They are throwing the book at you and seeing if any area is not exactly how they interpreted, they're going to make you change it. So, yeah, so we need to hire a civil engineer and go through the whole process and get the diameter of each one of our trees, and then put it into a calculator and calculate how many trees are we removing, how many credits are we getting, how many trees or bushes do we have to put back. I think it was over 200, including the bushes, the trees, the shrubs, the little plants. Like, yeah, it was quite a lot. It
was.
And we did mention that it does look amazing now,
yeah.
but it was just daunting to kind of see that. It's like, okay, if they take their trees that serious, what else are they going to take that serious? So, yeah, I mean, the permitting process, as hard as it was, we got it done. And once that was pretty much all wrapped up, I was like, hey, Cameron, here you go. Like, here's this project for you. So what was that like? What did you start doing on the front end, and then how did it evolve into the product it is now?
Well, on the front end, I think it was just a team, like coming together as a team. Like I said, you, John, and I, we met on site to come up with the game plan, because we knew when we kind of wanted to open. And we knew, since we had such a robust civil, like, exterior look that we had going on, we had to realize, okay, when's the best time for planting? We kind of just dealt with a similar situation at another property.
Yes, we did.
Where, the grass actually needs to take to finally get the CO. So it was like, we looked at that and go, okay, what about this robust civil plan do we need to go ahead and get done now, so that it either can adhere to the ground, or it can be, fully flourishing when we do CO.
Yeah, for those of you that didn't catch that, he literally meant that the grass has to grow for you to get the certificate of occupancy for the building.
Can't just have seed down. They want to actually see the grass coming up.
Yes, they want to see the grass growing for them to allow you to use the building. That's literally what.
So that was on another project, but this one we were like, okay, so we kind of worked backwards. Like, when we want to open up, okay. So we actually, when we met, I think, did we do 2 days? I think it might have been 1 day.
I think it was one.
Yeah.
It was a long day, though.
It was a long day. We had a landscaper meet us on site.
Yep.
And so we kind of just worked back with them, and like we had a game plan of attack on how we were going to do the exterior. Like, okay, this is how we're going to do the exterior. Luckily, we have the amazing John Serva on site, and he knows, especially when it comes to electrical, make safe and all that. We already had the interior game plan of, let's make this area safe.
Yeah.
Let's demo whatever wire we need to demo. That was an undertaking altogether. And before even all that happened, there's asbestos in there.
Yeah, I think
right before, I totally forgot.
Yeah, right before I think I handed the project off to you.
Yeah.
We were able to get the asbestos permit and all that kind of stuff and abate the asbestos. Really, the right way to do that is a full job site shutdown. Luckily, we didn't have to shut down the job site because nothing started, because we did it on the front end. And that took 3.5 weeks, and cost a lot of money to do it the right way, but we did it the right way. And we were able to get that done. But yeah, I mean, do you remember we had 2 landscape guys out there, and they were telling us 2 different. Remember, one of them's like, "Oh no, you can't plant in November," and the other guy's like, "No, it's great to plant in November."
I do remember that. Yeah. One, like, they were like, "It never rains in September."
Yeah,
and that September rolled around like it did not rain.
Yeah, I know.
It rained like one time, I think.
The guy we ended up using was actually right about everything, which is that's a good thing. Yeah, and more affordable as well. So
right. Yeah, so we did the asbestos abatement on that, and then we did the make safe. So then we started looking at it here. Okay, if we're going to get ready for hallway systems and doors, what else overhead stuff needs to be done? Because that is our big thing, is obviously a rush to get to hallways and doors.
Yes.
The big thing on that is we got to make sure HVAC's hung up. If we're going to do any type of painting, that's got to be done, because we don't want to hinder the hallways and doors from being installed, or anyone else doing their trade from a lift. Because if you have to then do it from a ladder, it's usually going to cost you more, right?
Yeah,
like if you have to transfer a ladder from unit to unit to then get up to somewhere, that's just going to take more time. So that's always the big rush. That was another big, like, okay, we need to figure out. We had a huge line item for paint, and we needed to figure out what we were going to paint, when we were going to paint, and get that process started. So a lot of research. Shout out to Dave Magnuson for his little trick on this one, because that was, I think, the first time I used it. I called down to Sherwin-Williams. I said, hey, give me your top 3 consumers, your top 3 producers out there. And one of them was one of the vendors we ended up using. And we got a very good price for it, and we started off right, and they took the ball and they rolled with it, and they were a very good vendor to work with. But there's just so many things going on with that project that I keep going back to, because even before that, we had to do LVLs.
Yes.
And so this project, is one of the very first things I did here at Elm. Was we got the plans, and there's this huge, plans are black and white. And there's just like all these lines marking out where LVLs are, right?
Yep.
And so at this point, we're like trying to find some AI software to help us. That's how many LVLs. When you have to look for an AI software to realize how many LVLs you're gonna need and how many bolts, like that's a lot.
Yes,
that's a lot.
It was a ton. I remember it being so much that I did not want to do it. I'm just gonna be honest. I was like, I'll make the new guy do it. I'm not gonna do this.
Yeah,
I'm like, because there's like so many dotted lines, and they go this way and that way, this way and that way.
Oh, and different LVLs were being called out.
Yeah.
So you had like an 18-inch LVL, you had a 12-inch LVL, you had a 3-inch, then the one that they called out, I think they called out a 3.5-inch or 3 3/4 inch. You couldn't even, that was a specialty made. Yeah. So then we had to go back and forth and say, okay, what if we put 2 1.25s together, or whatever it was.
And for those of you that think it's really easy to do that, you have to reference 2 or 3 different pages to find out which one goes where and what the quantity is, and then you have to manually count them all.
I mean, it's all figure outable. It's just, how much, CLF are we spending on doing this? It's so that was one of my very first things, and I remember tallying up, and Kyle and I worked on it. He did his own numbers, I did my own numbers, and the thing with that is, I think, if I can remember off the top of my head, and this is kind of a guess here, I think each LVL was either from each 20-foot LVL took around 60 bolts.
Yeah, about.
Yeah, and so that was the crazier thing. Like, our bolt count was huge.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
I remember on the ends you had to have
2, 4, 6.
You had to have 6. So
depending on the LVL.
Yeah. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you were allowed to start your diagonal stagger pattern. Yep. And then when you get to the end, you got to do another 6.
And it was depending on the stagger, it was either 6 to 8 inches, and it was a crazy undertaking. But there's a lot of figuring out with this, especially because this was a lift that we were going to do here at Elm. Where we purchased the material, we did all the counts on it, and then we hired a trade to just pretty much do the install.
Yes.
And luckily, we had a phenomenal trade that knocked it out. Like, we thought for sure this was going to take months.
Yeah.
And I think we scheduled for 2 months.
Yeah.
And I think they got it done in 3.
Yep. But 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
And
we had it scheduled for 2 months, so you got it done in 3 weeks. And they blew through so many drill bits, they had to get them from Germany.
These bits were $800 a pop.
Yep.
Because you had to go through LVL, then through existing timber, which was at least, I think, 10 inches thick.
Yeah.
And obviously as straight as you can. It was crazy to go back and look at all the. More crazy is just all the bolts that were going through.
Yeah. Yeah, we ended up not even buying bolts.
Correct. Yeah. So that was just a comparison that we had to look at. Is okay, we're gonna buy all these bolts, and the tricky thing was with buying the bolts is that not every timber joist that was already present was the same thickness. So we had variance, thicknesses of joists, variance thicknesses of LVLs that we were installing. So we're like, okay, what happens if we buy 2,000 of 6-inch? And we needed, 6.5 or 6 or 6 3/4, whatever it was. So that was a big, okay, we got to think about that issue coming up. But what if we just buy all thread? We can cut all thread to the length that we want.
Yes.
That saves us plenty of time. All thread's easy to cut. It's easy to get. They come in 20-foot 6. So that's ultimately what we ended up going with.
All thread is like a continuous threaded bolt, if you will, with no head on it. So you cut it, you put a nut on one side, drive it through, and then you put a nut on the other side and tighten them together.
So that was crazy to have that happen so quickly, especially 3 weeks. And that was strengthen up the floor for the hallways and door system because we needed that 125 psi that load factor.
Yeah,
which surprisingly that building didn't already have. So after that was done, we had the painter going on, and then HVAC was getting hung, electrical make safe, and then finally, our hallways and doors came. And this was a 3-story building. We had a basement. We had a midsection that was huge. I would say those sections alone in the middle was probably 50,000 square feet. Yeah. Roughly.
Yeah.
Then we had a top area that was, all these were just huge, huge undertakings, along with, the exterior getting that lined up, which we had this huge game plan. Like, me, you, and John, and we really looked at it. We thought
felt
about it.
good
All right,
about
we gotta start here in September, day one. So we make all these contracts. We send out bids. We get everything ready. And then things just start sliding, right? You're like, oh gosh, oh gosh, oh gosh. And then we run into winter. And Kernersville seemed to have one of the worst winters Kernersville has had in a long time.
Like 20 years,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, the coldest, and there was a decent amount of snow. I mean, there was snow up there for like 2 or 3 weeks, which is very rare for them.
I remember John, it was pretty decent weather here, and John sending me pictures. I'm like, is that snow?
Yeah.
It's like 50 degrees here.
I know. And then it snowed here, and then we're like, oh, we feel your pain. And then we went up, you and I went up, and we walked through the building, and we're like, man, our toes are going to fall off. It was freezing inside the building. You can't paint like that.
No, that was another holdup. So, the exterior paint had to stop.
Yep.
We're going back and forth with the township on, what color we had to paint, what windows we could cover up, how this exterior was going to ultimately look, just because also some of the building was kind of hidden in the back there, so we had to kind of work with the town. And
they definitely worked with us on that.
Yeah,
I was surprised at how much they worked with us on that.
That department of the town worked with us.
Yes.
This town
That's a good
had
catch.
Many different
that
departments.
department did help us, but yeah, I mean, to go along with the weather, we poured a section of the sidewalk, and then we had to wait another 4 or 5 weeks. We poured another section, and then we had to totally stop.
Yeah,
because the weather was just way too cold.
Yeah,
couldn't pour in that.
All while having a in-place tenant, who were trying to upgrade the whole facility. So we're also doing HVAC switch outs on their units.
Yes.
So we had to, it was very tricky on when we could cut the heat, when we could turn on our heat. So that was a whole nother process. And then I think that building had 3 meters on it already, or 2 meters, and 3 gas meters. So it was just a huge, because it had to be one of those where, I'm pretty sure you're going to know this, but where the initial building was built here, and then they just added on to.
And we had a re-roof. We had to put a brand new roof over the existing tenant as well.
That was a whole
another thing. So we ended up having to save their section for last because the weather looked so spotty as far as the rain and snow is concerned that we had to just be like, okay, we're going to wait until we have a week that looks fantastic over their building, because they have so many belongings in their building. We couldn't risk a rain or a thunderstorm or anything, because, once you tear off a roof and you look up and there's a storm, it's like there's nothing you can do. You can only put a roof down so fast. So that actually went pretty good. That was a lot of hardship, but we did replace the full roof.
Yep.
We upgraded the entire exterior. We painted the whole outside.
Yep.
We did sidewalks, trees, new fence. We did a bunch of new storefront,
which really turned that thing around. I think that was probably one of the more impressive transformations, was that storefront, changing really that to it looks really, if you haven't seen it on our LinkedIn, those photos that you posted, I was like, dang.
Yeah, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Yeah, that was a lot. And then as far as interior is concerned, fresh coat of paint, all brand new HVAC, a bunch of new electrical. I mean, we didn't really keep any of the existing electrical in the storage section. What else? Brand new office. I think that was kind of our best office kind of layout. Yeah. I think we all agreed that was pretty good.
Nice little flow to it.
Yeah. We did the display, the storage display. That was the first time we actually did a full-blown storage display with the roll-up door and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that one's probably, Kernersville is definitely going to go down in books as probably one of the top ones, just not only on square footage, but just all the facets. I mean, we had elevators in there, we had to put in stairs, we had this huge civil plan that we had to work with, gates, fence, so many plans over to, structural. I mean, brand new roof, HVAC system. It was a lot. It was
Sump
a lot
pumps.
Sump
pumps. Garage doors, outbuildings, multiple outbuildings.
Buildings things that we demoed.
Exterior
I forgot
parking.
There was a back wall, and then when you walked in on the left, there was a huge wall that went across. I was like, that got demoed.
It was held off 5 foot, that whole area. Yeah, we demoed that. Yeah, exterior parking, exterior lighting. They're pretty much encompassed everything.
Yeah, and so this is another great thing about working with your customer or us kind of being under the same roof.
Yeah,
and, especially as investors, is that we're very savvy on saving money. Not only do we save money with switching everything to the all thread, right, and looking at our LVL count and stuff, But Ryan over here, he's like, okay, how much do we need to paint the walls? He looks at it and he goes, okay, do we need to paint all 8 feet? Oh, I mean, these walls went up 12 feet or whatever it was. He's like, if we just liner panel the back. And I remember that was another time where we took a step back and we're like, okay, let's do the math on this. Let's see how much money our vendor's going to charge us for painting all the walls on the inside.
Yeah.
Or we can just do liner panel on the back, which also looks nice. It's a brand new liner panel.
It looks even better.
It does.
Yeah.
And we'll just we'll just paint all the way down to the 8-foot mark. And so I remember we did that, and it did save us a lot of money.
Yeah, it saved us like $30,000 roughly, and I think it's a better product.
Yeah.
Because now when you open the unit, instead of seeing like a painted brick wall, you see that corrugated metal, which looks really nice, and then right at the top you have painted brick above, and it just gives you that more like you're getting closer to that Class A facility look. It's a nicer, cleaner look.
Yeah, and the big thing was from I think how the whole conversation started on that was it was a big safety aspect because there was some storefront there that existed that we said, okay, if we back the unit straight up to the wall, there's going to be open storefront section of these are old windows, single pane, very easy.
Non-tempered single pane.
You could hit it and that thing's just going to shatter
into shards.
Yeah. So we're like, okay, we're going to, frame it up, OSB, insulate, and then cover it that way. And they're like, okay, but then they're going to have to get painted, right? So it's like instead of like having brick and then now you got OSB, how's that going to look? That's when we're like, okay, what if we just liner panel the whole thing? That protects the storefront in the back. We can insulate on the other side since we're already covering up the windows from the outside.
Yes.
So, that's just like some of the savviness that I enjoy that we look at. We're like, okay, instead of looking at black and white, we're like, okay, we got numbers on this? How can we save?
Yeah, absolutely.
What can we do right now? Even though we already have a budget, it's like we love always slashing that budget. We love doing it to where we don't even have to use any of our contingency.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. And we definitely did come under budget on this project. And, another big one that I don't think we touched on is the 589 CI. That was the first time we rolled that out.
Yeah. That was huge, especially, on your big ticket items where, you have, almost a $1 million roof, and then you're talking about storage hallways and doors almost being $1 million. So like those things where you can just save on tax alone.
Yeah.
That was another Ryan bonus special there on the win.
Thank you, sir. We got 3 bids on the roof, and then we were waiting for one more final bid. And this contractor actually helped us with another facility, Macon, Georgia. So we saved a decent amount of money. I'm being careful on what I say here because who knows who's going to watch this.
Yeah.
We saved a decent amount of money on the roof, and then on top of that, with the tax savings on the roof and the storage materials and everything else, I would love to do the math.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking several hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I agree. Yeah, and all it is that we're improving. It's a capital improvement to an existing facility.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, we found like that's what we fall into. We are improving. We're making capital improvements on this facility.
Exactly. And we consulted with 3 tax experts on this. And they were like, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should absolutely be using that. It's like, all right, that sounds good.
And you know what? I think when we were looking at rolling that out, and I know this is not a 589 CI talk, but like a lot of the concern was how are our vendors going to feel about it?
Yeah.
And really, there was no pushback from the vendors.
Yeah.
Like everyone understood, like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And they've dealt with other GCs that do the exact same thing. And it wasn't like they weren't willing to hurt the relationship over it. They're like, you're gonna take us somewhere else. This is a simple, easy. Yeah. We'll just make it happen.
It's simple, easy, it's legitimate, and it's because we're doing conversions, not new builds. Yeah.
Yeah. What else about Kernersville? I mean,
it had everything except for a helicopter pad, essentially.
Yeah.
That's it's like, where do we start?
I mean, we definitely had the structural reinforcement for that helicopter. Yeah. I feel like.
Yes, we did.
But, so here we are. All these things are going on. John's doing a great job of really, like, just pedal to the metal, getting us to where we need to be. The weather starts turning. We start doing some exterior work. The landscaper's out there. I'll get it done 3 days. Gets it done in 3 days. You love that type
that guy is awesome.
You love that vendor, where they're like, hey, I get it done. And they actually deliver.
He was driving down the street in a tractor with just a tree hanging off the front end of this. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. We're waiting on the weather to be a little bit better for asphalt some days and, seal coating and all that. But as we're coming down to the wire, We're getting our MEP finals. Most of our overheads have already passed final by now. We have the fire marshal coming in, building inspector coming in. So like we've gotten, I think there was I remember looking at 5 or 6 finals, like boom, complete.
All in like a week.
All in a week. And we're feeling dandy. We're feeling great. Oh, this is going to be easy. We're wrapping this up in 2-3 days.
Yeah, I actually texted. I remember when we got all 5 of those, I texted Josh and Keith, the city storage managers, and I was like, hey guys, just get ready.
Buckle up.
You better get ready because we're flying here. Only one more inspection left.
That's it. Easy inspection.
Yeah.
All would think, right? Zoning.
I've passed zoning from a desktop study before.
From a drive-by.
Yeah.
I've had zoning officials just drive by. Yep, it looks like you did it.
Yeah. Desktop, it just means, literally I call them and say, hey, we're ready for zoning. And they're like, did you do anything different than the plans? And I said, no. And they're like, okay, approved. That's how easy sometimes it can truly be. How did that one go, Cameron? Just give me
that did not go like that. That did not. I mean, you're
kidding.
No, they were by the book. They were very very official. And I mean, you can't be mad at them because they had everything. The only thing I would say builders get a little bit gripey about is okay, can I just add that and take a picture of it and send it to you? Mm-hmm. Right? There were some things we were missing, I think 3 shrubs altogether.
Yeah.
Out of 200 to miss 3.
Yeah.
Okay. How much? What am I saving here? But there was some parking. We decided to add more parking, which you would think as long as you have the minimum.
Yeah.
You're good. That may not always be the case. It may need to go into the plan review and make sure it gets annotated. And lucky for us, they take their annotation time seriously, and one review could take up to 30 days. Yes. So, needless to say, we were all pretty shell-shocked when they're like, yeah, it's going to be a little bit before you get that back, that CO. We're like, what do we do? We have a building that we literally had an inspection and said building. I was like, building final complete.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. What do we? This means nothing because I have one more inspection, obviously.
Yeah.
And then my favorite part was, so finally we get zoning to sign off. Beautiful day. Woo! We're celebrating. Ryan and I are celebrating. We actually have, I think we have a podcast or
an
episode
live
where we're celebrating. We're so excited.
It truly was. We passed the final inspection.
And this is at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. Right?
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, we should have it by lunch.
Yeah. Well, they said they'd have it to us by lunch.
Well, our super said they'll have it to us by lunch. We're like, okay. Okay, sweet. Easy peasy. 1 o'clock comes around, nothing. Okay, 2 o'clock rolls around.
Something?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Give them a call. Hey, just looking for that CO paperwork so I can give it all to our city storage team and they can open up and everything. No, you gotta apply for a CO. I was like, what?
I remember you called me and you're like, Kernersville strikes again. And I'm like, no, it's impossible.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So luckily, of course, we go right into action. Okay, I got to apply for the CO. Let me just do it. So we applied for the CO, and thankfully, the town, that department, they're like, no, you've already passed all your building stuff.
Yeah, they're like,
you don't need this.
They literally said
CO.
They don't need to apply for CO.
Yeah,
here's the CO.
So that was nice because I was getting on a plane. And I remember Ryan texting me hey, this is for your flight. Hey, have a good one. And we got CO.
Right on the buzzer.
So
right.
That was nice.
Yeah.
Gosh, that was a big celebration.
Yeah. So Kernersville's wrapped.
Kernersville's wrapped. And that was a big one. We still got to do the postmortem on it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do an episode where we talk about postmortems. I'm not sure if we've already done one.
Deep dive into postmortems.
Yeah. It's kind of how we look. I
was going to ask you, give me a 30-second, what is a postmortem?
It's pretty much the whole project, especially, from a schedule and from a budget standpoint, how we did on it.
Yeah.
What are the numbers that we can take? What is the information that we can take from it? And then that way, when we do our historical data, there's nothing that's skewed because sometimes, when you have a project going on, some invoices may get entered into the wrong cost code, or, there could be a scope that, for example, we had a project where we had to move a refrigerator, a huge refrigerant unit that wasn't previously planned. So where did we put that? MISC labor. Now our MISC labor line item, historical data is skewed, right? So it's okay, how do we make sure that when we look back at Kernersville, that everything that was accounted for is correct, and then now we have the historical data to move forward and make sure we're accurate moving forward.
Yeah, historical data is a big one, and then also it's the QuickBooks matches our construction management software, so that to the cent they're identical. And then we look at schedule, and then we look at basically any lessons learned, anything we could implement into our pre-construction checklist, all that kind of stuff.
And make sure whoever is owed money or paid money, that's a big one, just being under the same umbrella of some of these, companies, like some intercompany loans. Sometimes, items to close on a loan is shifted out of the construction budget or wherever it may be from acquisitions or wherever. But we just want to make sure, like, hey, this is what we paid for the building. Yeah. This was everything that went for it. This is construction. So that's really what this morning's about.
Leveling all the books. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Sweet. Well, yeah, we still have to do the postmortem, but the doors are open. They're renting units, and that's a huge success. It's a common saying, but it's like you learn more from what goes wrong than what goes right. And not that anything really went wrong, but it was a lot of hard learning lessons. Mm-hmm. And I think we have way more questions to ask jurisdictions before we get started.
Definitely jurisdictions. Yeah.
And also, it definitely feels better to get that CO when it was an absolute battle. Like, it doesn't feel great in the moment when you're battling to get that CO.
Yeah.
But once you get the CO, I mean, that feels pretty good.
I understand, yeah. A drive-by CO, that doesn't feel like, I remember that was like, come on, just give it to me. And then we got it.
Yeah, but then once you get that, it's like,
I beat you.
Hanging up on the wall.
Yeah, never again.
On to the next one.
So Kernersville just being this amazing project, I feel, and I know, like, this whole team at Elm cannot be more proud than, our site super, John, like, just being the spearhead on this one and really taking his knowledge and sharing it with the team, because we would not be able to get this thing done without him. Like,
absolutely.
He is just one of those guys that his knowledge is so valuable.
Yeah,
right?
It's dense.
And it is dense. That's a good word for it. You
just never know when he's going to show up and be like, I think X, Y, and Z. And it's like, I would have thought of that eventually. Yeah,
this is one of the projects where, like, that's where I got to see a lot of, like, his knowledge shine, especially when it comes to the whole load factor and electrical. When he was just, that needs to be switched to 307. I was like,
transformer this and that. And it's like,
I don't know what you're
go ahead, transform it, buddy.
I don't know what you're talking about. But I just want to shout out John real quick, because he is huge to this team, and we cannot do any of these projects without him, especially without his knowledge.
Yeah, huge shout out to John and Kyle. That loan was a little bit tricky on the front end. We had to get a company loan to start the project to secure financing for the roof and for the HVAC, and then you have to go to the bank and close on the bank and then get that money credited back and then start the bank draw for the regular project, and then we had to hold back some of the profit, and portion of the profit was in the HVAC but not on the roof, and then it all had to be, it's the accounting seems so easy, but I promise you it's not, and we couldn't do it without Kyle.
Definitely. That is 100% the fact.
And that pretty much wraps it up.
That wraps up Kernersville.
It's getting hot in here. Let's get out of here.
Deep dive.
Yes. Kernersville Deep Dive, Season 2, Episode 16. Thanks for watching Elm Elaborates, and we'll see you next time.
All right.